Rashawn, let me start with you. You study policing and law enforcement interactions with their communities. With this video, this video that we heard that got from the police chief overnight, speaking and pleading to the community. When it comes to the police chief, what is she trying to do? And do you think it will work?
Well, look, thanks for having me on. I mean, as you mentioned, I've been studying policing for about a decade. We have a lab where we have trained police officers with our virtual reality training program at the University of Maryland. But I'm also a product of Tennessee. I attended the University of Memphis. And what she's saying is that we are trying to follow the process to the T. We have fired the officers. We are expecting that charges will be coming forth. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has been called in. And I think the big thing that the community is grappling with is that these 5 officers are Black. And one thing that we find in our research is that the race of the officer really doesn't change officers' attitudes and behaviors a whole lot. I think that's important for people. Up to this point with this movement for Black lives, it's primarily been about white officers doing things to Black victims. Our research suggests something otherwise, and instead is something about the way that officers are socialized and the way that they're trained that lead to them enacting harm on Black bodies.
What we have so far from the police statement is officers stopped Tyre Nichols for reckless driving. The officers approached Nichols and, quote, a confrontation occurred and the suspect fled the scene on foot. Then we know they say officers pursued Nichols and tried to take him into custody. That's when, quote, another confrontation, it's described, took place between the officers and Nichols. Then the officers take him into custody. Nichols, according to the police statement, complains of, quote unquote, shortness of breath. An ambulance is called, and then Nichols is then transported to the hospital in, quote unquote, critical condition. That's what we have so far in terms of what happened. And we know that Tyre Nichols died 3 days later. We know that the police chief has described this beating as heinous. What questions do you have, and just from the facts of this police statement we see so far?
Yeah, so we talked about what the city has done right in terms of their response to the officers. This highlights what I think the city has done wrong. Part of that importance of quick transparency is letting the public know what happened, at least the raw facts in a timeline. And this timeline raises more questions than it resolves. To describing these two interactions between the police and Mr. Nichols as simply a confrontation with no further detail, that's going to look even worse when this video comes out. If it lives up to its description, which I anticipate it will, that's going to make the use of the word confrontation there look ridiculous and somewhat like they were trying to hide the ball a bit. We don't have any details about why he was pulled over. What was the reason to initiate this interaction with law enforcement? What circumstances surrounded his apparent decision to flee that first quote unquote confrontation? There's a lot of room for detail here that I think the city could have been more forward leaning in revealing to the public